Well, hello, writers. Welcome to episode number 215 of How Do You Write? I'm Rachael Herron. So thrilled that you are here. Extra super duper thrilled because today we are talking to Jeff Elkins. And Jeff is an old friend. He comes to me from the Writer's Well when Jay Thorne and I were doing that show. And he's just been around and part of my writing community for a long time. And he listened with horror as I was answering questions the other day on the mini podcast. And I was talking about how to make different voices of characters sound unique, which is something that I always add later in revision. He has a system of doing that, and I am so excited to share this with you. It kind of blew my mind. It is truly unique, truly his. I know that you are going to get so much out of listening to it. I basically couldn't wait to get off the phone with him in order to start implementing it into my work. And yeah, so look forward to that. That's going to be Jeff coming up here in a minute. If you ever watch me on the YouTube video that goes up, only a few of you do that. Most of you listen to this in podcast form, but hopefully you will notice, even if you're just on the podcast, that this sounds a little bit better. I have upgraded my recording studio here, and I actually have a mic that is much better. I was using a Samson Meteor mic, and I have moved up in the world. I'm actually using a pop filter and a shock mount and all of those things, which I have always known I should be using. And hopefully this will increase your listening audio pleasure. Let's see what's been going on around here writing wise. I had a migraine, so I had a couple of days off there. I am recovering, have recovered. But I want to say that I did use some of my downtime while I had the migraine to think. So when I'm on migraine, when I have a migraine, I'm on a bunch of drugs. And it does kind of free my mind to think about things and make connections that I possibly wouldn't have before. Migraines are unique in that they are not just in the brain, they're the whole body. The whole body is reacting to the migraine. Many people's stomachs are involved, but for me, also involved, non-drug dependent, is the way I think. I am able to kind of get back to this 30,000 foot view into a book and think about it. So I actually used some of the time, not a lot of the time, because then my brain would drift away in pain. But when I was able to, I was really thinking about the structure of this book that I am first drafting. I want to make that really clear. I am first drafting, so it is nothing but a hot mess. However, it's going to be a book. That's really something I am reveling in knowing right now, that no matter how messy it is, it's going to be a book someday because I know how to revise. No matter how messy your book is, no matter how messy your writing is, even if you don't know how to revise yet, you can learn. It is a learnable process, and it's just super exciting. And I'm still, now that I'm back at the page, feeling better, I'm still just throwing crappy words out. And one of my students said just this morning in Rachel Says Right, she said there is a level of freedom that comes with that knowledge. That means you can just screw around on the page, have a good time, leave sentences incompletely, paragraphs hanging, jump from chapter to chapter, add characters, kill the characters off in the next scene because they weren't a good idea in the first place, knowing that you can remove them entirely or add them even further when you get to revision. That knowledge of that freedom is so fun and wonderful. So I hope that if you are playing with first drafting, you are remembering that you can fix anything. So I am doing that. Another thing that I'm doing, I will be almost back by the time this airs. So I feel comfortable saying this. I am tomorrow going away by myself. A friend of mine owns a beach house in one of those fancy beach areas. And she doesn't look right at the water, but it's a 1-minute walk to the water, basically, around this little corner. And I'm going there for 4 days alone, 100% alone. My wife is going to be here taking care of the sick dog and the other dog and the 2 cats, and I am going away. And yes, I have guilt about this. However, she knows she's also allowed to go away whenever she wants. and can do so. And I pointed out to her when these plans were made, I said, do you realize that when I'm gone, you are going to be alone too? And she just brightened because neither of us have been alone since March. You might understand this. It seems like there's this, it's not easy for anybody. The people who are alone are very, very, very alone. And I cannot imagine what that is like. And then the people who are together are very, very, very freaking together. And I need to be not together for a while. My wife and I have both always very much enjoyed and valued our alone time in really big ways. Like, we are very comfortable saying, I need you to leave the house because I have not had alone time in, 4 days. I need you to go somewhere, go to the movies, go to the store, go to the cafe. And we can't do that anymore. We haven't been able to do that since March. So I'm going to be alone. And I think I'm going to work. I am planning on getting a lot of words. Oftentimes when I go away for some kind of vacation like this or any other kind of time when I leave town, which I haven't done since February, I don't write. I fail to write. What I really succeed in doing is lying around and reading and thinking and jotting notes and journaling and drinking tea and walking along the cliff and going down to the beach. But this time I'm bringing my Alpha Smart and I'm just going to play at having fun. And I'm also going to give myself grace if nothing gets done, because that is more my typical MO. But I am just going to feel my way into it. Speaking of feeling my way into things, I will let you know that one of the motivations for getting this new recording equipment is that I have a new podcast. Ha ha! Just call me Jay Thorne. No, my new podcast is called You're Already Ready. And it is really tiny, short bites of pieces that I'm putting up. Basically, I am reinstituting my blog. I am writing some things that I am thinking, and I'm going to put them out in this little 5 to 7 minute podcast 3 to 5 times a week. That is my goal. So go give that a try. I know it's findable on iTunes or whatever it's called now. iTunes podcasts, wherever, Apple Podcasts maybe. On Google Play Podcasts, it's kind of hard to find. It is available and it's there, but it's hard to get to. Stitcher, I know it's available. I think it's already available at Spotify, so you can check that out. You can either search for my name or search for You're Already Ready. And let me know what you think. There's about 5 episodes up right now. And it is not written. It's not made for writers. It's made for creative people. However, you know me, everything that I talk about in the back of my mind, I am talking about writing. I'm talking to you. I just did an episode on my beloved glitter boots. And, it's things like that. I'm talking about the move to New Zealand. It is more scripted because these are writings. They're basically mini essays that I'm putting on the blog and then reading for the podcast. So it is my professional voice rather than this show, which is always unscripted and always a little bit chaotic because of it. So give it a try. Tell me what you think. And I just wanted to let you know about that. I'll bring it up again in the future when I know that everybody can reach it and find it. But do give that a try if you're interested. Now, let us please jump into talking to Jeff about dialogue and voices. Please let him blow your mind the way that he did mine. And you should go sign up for his stuff and get his information and get his little tips and tools. And I know I already have, and I'm already putting them to use, like I said. So wherever you are, happy writing. I hope you get a little bit of crappy work done knowing that you can change it later. Or if you're revising, I hope that you are just reveling in that feeling of making pages and chapters and books better. Please find me where I am on the internet and tell me how you're doing. I love to hear, and we will talk soon, my friends. Well, I could not be more pleased today to welcome to the show Jeff Elkins. Hello, Jeff.
Hey, I'm so excited to be here.
We're laughing because if you're watching on the YouTube, Jeff's got a little mini person behind him waving, and I hear there's like 73 others running around.
Yeah,
So
there's well, and some of them aren't so many. The 17-year-old is over 6 feet tall, so he's he's not so many anymore.
so his head
Yeah,
will be out of the shot. Yes.
that's right. Yeah, if he comes behind me, you'll just see his torso. Yeah, he's but yeah, I have 5 kids.
Oh my gosh.
7, the oldest is 17, the youngest is 6. and so
That's
they're
Your hands are very, very full. Okay, speaking of
hands are
those
full.
full hands, let me give you a little bio
Okay.
to lead into that. Jeff Elkins is the author of 12 novels and leads the writing team for an innovative technology company that simulates difficult conversations for professionals to practice. Woohoo! In the fall of 2020, Jeff began a new business, dialoguedoctor.com, that helps writers defeat monomouth by coaching them to build engaging characters and write realistic dialogue that will pull readers into their own work and keep them reading over multiple books. Jeff lives outside of Baltimore in the United States with his wife and 73 children, like I said. So welcome. You and I have been friends for a long time. You were one of our favorite listeners on the Writers
Oh,
Well.
yeah, I've been I mean, so to be honest, we say friends. The truth is I've been following your work for a really long time, and you've had a
Oh,
dramatic impact on my writing, especially my motivation to write. So yeah, I listened on the Writers Well, and was really started listening to the Writers Well in like a down time where I was like
mm,
really struggling to like figure out what I was doing and like finding my voice. And I kind of cycle through those. I think everybody does, but
everybody
just
does, yeah.
like so down. And so discovering the Writers Well and you and Jay had a huge and actually when you were pedal to the metal had a huge impact on me. Just hearing somebody be honest about what this is, what
Yeah.
this life is. So that was great. And then started following your podcast and started following the Writers Well. Um, and now I'm a Patreon member of yours. And
Thank
anybody
you.
who's listening to this who isn't a Patreon member is super missing out because the articles you write are fantastic.
Thank
And
you.
yeah, people should definitely get on your Patreon
You
immediately.
know, I love, love, love writing those. And I did not pay him to say that. But the thing about you,
Oh,
Jeff, is that in the same way that I'm honest on the show, in the same way that Jay and I were always honest on the Writers Well, you've always been honest with us in your comments. And I do feel like we're friends. I feel like I know your life over the course of years. You don't paint it all with a happy picture. You actually would tell us what was the problem and what was going on and what you were
yeah.
struggling with. And that meant a great deal to us. It really did.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, I learned a long time ago that I'm terrible at hiding anything. I'm really bad at it. Like I'm
No
just
poker face.
I have zero poker face. I'm an open book all the time. And so I finally got to a place where it's like I just need to embrace this and just like go extreme vulnerability at all times. It's like, why hide or like, try to sneak away from what's going on. If masks look ridiculous on me, why put one on in the first
Yeah,
place? Right? Like so.
exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. Although I trust you're wearing your mask when you're out
Oh, when
and
I'm out and
about.
about. Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. Well, and there's no really cleaning up the physical appearance over here. So masks actually help. I was telling Wendy yesterday, my wife is Wendy. I was telling her yesterday, I was like, I'm probably just gonna wear a mask forever. Because like
I love it.
I love it.
I can have resting bitch face. Like I
Oh,
don't have to half smile at
all day.
anybody. It's
Yeah.
it's the best. But the other thing about that whole vulnerability thing is that people sense inauthentic. What's the word for this?
Authenticity.
Non-authenticity,
Yeah.
inauthenticity a mile away, and they run away and they sense vulnerability and truth and lean in to listen.
Yeah, I think, growing up in minority communities, and just having a passion to be around to be an ally to minorities, which is part of a big
Yeah,
passion of mine,
yeah,
is that like I want people to feel safe
yeah,
around me at all times, right?
yeah.
Like I never want anybody to feel like I don't know what he's thinking, I don't know what he feels about something. So I'm just kind of all out there at all times and also try to lead with a humble apology. Right? So,
I love starting
you
out with
know,
the humble apology. But like when we were emailing, I noticed that you had Black Lives Matter in your email signature. And
yeah,
I freaking love that. And
yeah.
that would have made me want you on the show. And I'm the one who asked you to come on the show. So this is fantastic. Let's talk about your writing process because you
Okay.
work, I'm assuming with the innovative technology company, you're working full time, right?
I do work full time. Yeah, I have
Plus
and it's a
you've
really
written
complicated
12
job.
books.
I've written 12 books in the last 6 years.
Plus you have this new business. Where
Plus I
on
have a new
earth do you
business.
get the writing done? And
Yeah, that's a
how?
great question. So how and where I get the writing done is right here. So I work off of a laptop, and my work day, it starts at 7:30, and ends at about 4:30. That's
Uh-huh.
my like professional job. The job is all consuming. It's not
Yeah.
something that I can like half-ass.
Yeah,
I
you
have
have
a
to
team of
show up
5
for it.
writers that
Mm.
like I work with and train and lead, um and the simulations we build are non-linear, which means that we have to write conversations so that the person our simulation's talking to can say anything they want at any time, which is
It sounds like the worst game of choose your own adventure ever.
we talk about it as like when we're hiring people and they're asking like what is writing this like, it's like creating a three-dimensional crossword puzzle
That sounds
where
awful.
yeah, where you just like if you took crossword puzzles and like stacked them up
Yeah.
and then you had to be able to go like anyway, that's kind of what I do during the day. What's fantastic about that is that as writers we're professional mimics. So we sit with professionals in a whole ton of fields, from like working with the military to working with social workers to working with therapists who are like trying to learn cognitive behavioral therapy to like, working with today I was working with suicide prevention
Mm.
crisis counselors, right? Like
Hmm.
we're always working with different people, and we come with empty hands and we sit down in front of them and we're like, our job is to duplicate the conversations you have in real life. So that's why we say we're professional mimics, because we're
Yeah.
sitting down and we're duplicating what other people do. Um, so that's my day job. It's all consuming. It's big. It's a lot. And I don't really, with 5 kids, I get up early. I get up at 5, but I read in the mornings. I have a couple like meditative readings I do, and then I do my own meditation for like 5 minutes, 10 minutes if I'm lucky. And then the 6-year-old's up by 6, so there's no
So
like
this is not your writing time in
no,
the
there's
early
no like
morning.
5 a.m. writing time, like 5 a.m. I've had periods where I'm like, I'm part of the Twitter 5 a.m. Writers Club, and I'll do it for like a week, and then at like 5:20, the 6-year-old heard me downstairs, and he's like in my lap, and I'm like, I'm still writing, So like, it's just not. I finally got to a place where it's like, it's just not worth the emotional energy it takes to
Yeah.
make that happen. So, I'm a night writer. Um, so how I write, I wait for everybody to go to bed, which is bedtime usually starts around here about 8:30. Like we have a cascading bedtime because I have cascading kids. So
Oh,
like,
I would start it at like 4.
yeah, I'm tempted.
Time for
There
you,
are days
Junior.
where I'm looking at
Go.
Wendy. I'm like, hey, is it bedtime yet? Like, can we start now? Yeah, and we do start the process because like bedtime is a process. So especially for little kids, so we start the process at like 6, and there's like baths and then reading books to them. Like we read to the younger kids every night. The older kids have like qualified reading time, like they have to read for 30 minutes before they go to sleep. So we have
I
like
love that.
yeah, there's a routine. I mean, with a big family in a tiny house, there you have to have routines. So yeah, around 8:30, the house is quiet. The teenagers and Wendy and I are the only people left awake, and so that's when I get to write. So I usually write. I try to spend. My rule is 2 hours on the business.
You can
So the
get so
business
much done in 2 hours.
Oh, it's crazy. Yeah,
Yeah.
like and some nights I'm like, "Okay, tonight I'm not writing a new chapter. Tonight I'm just working on my back matter." Or
But it's
tonight
focused time.
yeah, but
Okay.
I'm doing that for 2 hours.
Yeah.
For me, I have to block out distractions, so I create a Spotify playlist every month that's like, this is my writing playlist, so I just
Ooh.
turn that on, and I try to get 2 hours in. Sometimes I can get like 2 and a half, and then I'm trying to shut it down by 11:30 so I can be in bed by midnight,
Yeah, because
so I
you
can
need
be
some
back up
sleep
again. Yeah,
sometimes. Yeah.
yeah, so that's my process, and it's just about like, you know, it's about understanding that I'm sacrificing things that I might enjoy in order to have the life I want to have.
Yeah.
So like I don't watch a ton of like I don't sit down at night and watch TV. Um I don't sit down at night and like cuddle up in front of a book. I read before I go to sleep. Mostly because I demand that my children do it, so I have to do it too. Uh, so
the best way to go to sleep.
Yeah, but so for me, it's just about like building a routine and like working that routine every night, um,
Yeah.
and giving myself a lot of grace, right? Like, I I remember I got really dark a couple years ago when I got on this obsession of like I have to write a book a month.
Oh, that'll kill you.
Yeah, and I
That
tried really hard.
yeah.
I was building a series and I was like, okay, I can't write a book a month, but maybe I can like stock up a series and then publish a book a month. And I got the first two published. I was like, I'm going to publish the first two while I write the third one. And I got to that one, and I was like, I've used all of my writing time publishing the first two books. I like marketing the first two books. Like I don't have any writing time left to finish the third one. And so I just kind of had to surrender. Like this isn't the kind of writer. I don't have the bandwidth to be that kind of writer. I would love to
I
be that kind of writer, but I can't do it.
I love it what I've mentioned this before, but what Joanna Penn says is like when she realized she couldn't be a book a month, it gave her the permission to like just say, okay, I'm not that. I'm never going to be that. Don't have to be that.
Yeah.
Like you, every like clockwork. It just happened to me a couple weeks ago. I get that bug again. Like, could I do a book a month? Could I do a book even every 2 months?
Yeah.
And get on that train. And then I realized I don't want to. But yeah,
Yeah. I've also gotten to the place where I'm like, that writing fast experiment taught me that I need space between books. I need at least 2 months
you have
between books.
you have to know your process,
Yeah.
and you've
So
learned
I
your process.
I work on a book obsessively. Like I'll get a bug in my head and a lot of times writing books for me, and I'm I'm starting to understand this because I took Becca Stein's um Strengths
The Clifton
Finder.
strengths,
Yeah, the
yes,
Clifton Strengths
yeah.
thing that you had talked about on a show. I broke down, went and took it. But so as a strategic individualist restorative person, solving problems is a huge deal for me.
Solving
Uh,
problems, but not only with that strategic piece, you do it intuitively and you don't even know how you do it.
yep.
You arrive at the solution because your intuition is telling you. Your strategic is so high.
Yeah.
That's
So
that's awesome.
if we get into that, like how I write a book, I create a problem for the book. I
Mhm.
put up a spreadsheet of beats that I have to fill. So like the beats are kind of like part of the puzzle I have to build, and then
Mm,
I puzzle it out from there. So it's and that really drives me because I can't stop until I finished that first draft.
it seems
It's
like that.
obsessive.
It seems like you have all, but even before you did the Clifton strength, you've already geared your writing life and even your professional life to really suit those strengths that you have.
Yeah, and I'm a huge proponent of self-understanding,
Yeah.
of like coming to know yourself, understand. So the Clifton Strengths is was great for me because it's, kind of feeding that, it's giving me more language to talk about myself, and not necessarily like, so just to say, like, I think people get into these like personality tests and stuff and find them limiting, like, oh, I'm this so I can't do these things.
Right.
So just as an encouragement, like, that's not what it's about. It's about giving yourself language to understand who you are so that you can then come around strategies that are going to work for you. So
Exactly. Yeah.
yeah. So like and I'll move from one to the other. Like I had a Myers-Briggs obsession for a while, just learning about like, okay, what is it about me that's unique, so that I can play to that. And then my wife and I both are really big into the Enneagram. We
I
started
haven't
doing
done that
that.
yet.
It's fun. It's interesting. Um, yeah, it's good.
I've
It's
wanted to do it,
spot on for
especially
us.
for I wanted to do it for characters. I've heard of people playing with
Yeah.
using Enneagram to prompt that. Has your wife done the Clifton Strengths yet?
She hasn't. No,
Okay, so
she just does the Enneagram.
I'm a number 3 achiever, which explains a lot
Okay.
about me. Like I have super, super low discipline. It's in the, 30s or something. But my achiever is what gets everything done, along with my strategic. But my wife, we learned that she is number 34 achiever. Like the very last is achiever. And that just explains the dishes, right? It
Yeah.
explains 16 years of marriage dishes. Like and now I'm able to let it go. Like
It's really
I
funny.
understand.
That's awesome. Yeah, Enneagram did that for me and Wendy. It was because we were, and it was really about understanding our kids. Like we were looking for a way. Our kids became teenagers, and we were noticing, like, man, the 17-year-old's a lot like me, and the 15-year-old's a lot like Wendy, but in different ways. And then we've got this 13-year-old that's all his own self. And so we were like, we need some kind of language to
Yeah.
help them process what's going on. So as a family, we read uh one of the Enneagram books. I can't remember which one it is off the top of my head. And it was we like would read it, we'd read like a chapter in the car. And it was funny, we'd be reading it and like one of the kids would start laughing. They'd be like, yeah, that's me. So it's not,
Oh,
it talks about like the inner life and what's happening interior. So it's a really nice partner, I think, to the Clifton Strengths
maybe that'll be
Finder.
my next obsession.
Now, Enneagram doesn't tell you how to fix it. That's the
Whereas
thing
Clifton
about,
Strengths, I think, really does.
yeah, Clifton
Clifton,
Strengths is
yeah.
all about like, here's what you should be like here's how you should be focusing and working to like better improve yourself as a leader and a creative but especially with what
Yeah.
Becca's doing, like the whole like let's use your strengths as a
Use the
writer.
strengths and let go of all the stuff that doesn't work for you. I can let go of
Yeah,
discipline. I don't need that because I can use
yeah,
my other core strengths to do that.
yeah. Whereas the Enneagram's really about self-understanding.
Mm.
And I find it is a great tool of like self-forgiveness. So
I could always use more of that.
yeah, and it's really great in like understanding the people around you. The key is like, so with all of these personality traps, there's a thing of like, I'm going to label people. Now that I
Yeah.
have my like number system, I'm going to start walking around being like, she's a 7, she's a 6. Um, and that's not really helpful. So like
Yeah.
the key to the Enneagram is for like I do some marriage couple counseling. And used to do a lot more of it. But we'd have them take the Enneagram so that they could have language to explain to one another what's going
Hmm.
on inside of them. And so that way, like you can understand the people in your life a little bit better if you all have this shared language to discuss like what's happening. So like my son and I are both extremely anxious. We're just very anxious people,
Hmm.
which equates to a 6 on the Enneagram, where we
Hmm.
fear everything. um, because of trauma I had as a kid, I tend to run at fear, whereas he tends to hide. So
Mm.
doing like talking about personalities as a family really helped us, because it was one of those things where I can like, he was applying for colleges and he was stalling. And so he'd sit down at his laptop and I could see him like trying to write his college essay and just being like, ah.
I
So
can't do it. Yeah.
yeah. And so I'd ask him, I'd like, who's in charge right now? Are you in charge or is your anxiety in charge? Like who's winning at the moment? Is fear winning or are you winning? And like, he'd always go like, my anxiety's in charge. I was like, all right, well, so like tell your anxiety you got some stuff to do today, right?
Right.
Like and get to work. So it's that kind of like just getting that like common language, I think is really great.
I love that you did
Um,
that with your family. And everybody loves to talk about and think about themselves and share that
oh, of
with
course, yeah.
each
That's
other.
like,
You know,
yeah,
everyone
it's
loves
human
that.
nature. Yeah, I'm the center of the world. Of course, I love to. Of course, I want to take tests to find out what my personality is. Yeah.
Speaking of Jeff being the center of the world right now, what is your biggest challenge in writing and what's your biggest joy?
Oh man. So my biggest challenge is crippling self-doubt that I use as an excuse to
Yeah.
sabotage my own writing.
I laugh, but it's not funny. Like it's just,
No, I
yeah,
mean it's funny, but it's also
but
very
it's not
painful.
funny. Yeah.
Yeah, it's also seriously painful. So I have I really do. I have monstrous self-doubt. So that like I kind of approach things with the idea of like I'm gonna fail.
Hmm.
Uh, and I have for a long time, and like I've been in therapy. I understand why I do it, and understanding why it is not always helpful. And part of the reason it's a struggle is because I use it as a crutch. So like I wrote 10 books before I marketed anything at all. I never paid for an ad. I never like put them in a like a book share or like a newsletter share
Wow.
swamp or anything, because I'd write it and I'd be like, nobody's gonna like this. And I just like throw it out in the world and be like, well, it's done. Nobody's gonna like it. I don't have to even think about it anymore. I can move on to the next one. So and like people still, I still do this. People are like, which book is your best book? Like, where can I start with your books? And I'll be like, the next one. Everything else, everything before is crap. The next one's my best one. The next one's my best one. So there is some optimism to that that's like helpful because I keep striving forward to the next thing.
Yeah.
But there's also like it really has hurt my writing career because like, I wrote 6 books before I ever even considered engaging the writing community. Because I
Wow.
just
You
I
did that
just
all by
assumed.
yourself.
Yeah, I just assumed like, okay, I'm going to be outcast. So in an assumption of like I'm not going to be accepted, I
Mhm.
was like, well, then I'm not going to try. So like I'm not going to. I would like listen to podcasts and I would read on my own. But the whole idea of like networking, meeting other authors, for me,
Mhm.
it wasn't about being shy because I'm not shy. For me, it was about like they're not going to like me, so I'm just
Mhm.
not going to. And part of that
Much
comes with that.
easier if you
Oh, it's
don't.
so much easier.
Yeah.
Yeah, so much easier not to try. And part of that comes with that strategic thinking of mine is that like I'm solving a problem that doesn't exist before it even happens.
Got
So
the
I'm like,
problem,
oh,
right? I've got the
yeah,
solution right here.
yeah. The
Don't
problem is
engage.
nobody likes me. So the solution is do this all by yourself.
Yeah.
Um, yeah. So yeah, so that's been the most destructive thing for my writing. I started marketing my books in 2019. So
For
in the
you.
fall of 2019.
Good
So
for you.
I just started.
For the person who's listening who feels exactly the same way that you do, what is one piece of advice that you would give them?
Whew, that's tough. So it's hard because there's a balance you have to strike between accepting the truth of the moment, um, and at the same time recognizing that that is everyone's truth. So like the truth of the moment is that like, yes, your books probably aren't Ernest Hemingway. Right, like let's just accept that. And
Right.
that like, yeah, you are likely never going to be John Grisham.
Right.
Right, like,
Yeah.
let's just put
Yes.
that yeah.
Yes.
You can follow all the right steps, right? Like, you can do everything Stephen King did, and the chances of you making it to the NFL of writing and being the Peyton Manning quarterback of writing are less than 0.001%.
Mhm.
So, just go ahead and accept that. That, like,
Then
yeah,
that coin has that other side.
but then that coin has that other side, and that like that's true of all of us,
Yeah.
right? Like, we're all out here, and when you go to, like, network and you're like, "Nobody's gonna like me," just understand that everyone in that room feels that way. Everyone in that room is
Yep.
like, I don't want to be here and nobody's gonna like me. So
No
like,
one's gonna like me. I also wrote the worst book. They're all better than I am.
yeah,
No, everyone is feeling that way.
yeah. And I would say part of what has helped me and what has been really good for me is taking the focus off of myself
Mm.
and off of my own work and really starting to think of my, and this is what made the shift for me in 2019, was starting to think of my work as something I'm doing to help other people.
Yes, that
So
whole idea of writing being altruistic,
mhm.
of putting our writing out there, being a service, we're giving for others. We're doing
Yeah.
for others.
Yeah, and I think, a book I'd recommend people struggling with self-doubt read is Elizabeth Gilbert's Big Magic,
I love that book.
where she personifies the creative force as the muse that's, like, bringing you a story. She's even got a weird story in that book about, like, she rejected a story the muse gave her, and then, like, her best friend actually, like, called her and was like, "I'm gonna write this story."
And it's the
And
weirdest. It's like
the
it's no one would believe that they're gonna go
yeah.
to the Amazon and do this exact thing that
It's so
Elizabeth turned
crazy
down.
weird.
Yeah.
Yeah, but understanding that, like, whatever your spiritual background is, understanding that, like, what you are giving to the world in the story is a gift that you have received outside of yourself, and that you are really just the agent of transfer that has been given the privilege of bringing that gift to the people that that are going to read it. And so,
Yeah.
like, yeah, and then understanding that marketing is not a self-obsession because that's part of what like drove me away from it was that like, oh, I don't like myself. So I don't want to talk about myself.
Right,
Like I don't
right.
like I don't like who I am. I don't like who um I don't like my own writing. Like I write it and I'm like, oh, it's garbage. Um like I don't like what I do. So but coming to understand that like marketing isn't actually about me saying I like this. Marketing is about me taking this gift I was given that I'm intended to give to others and then doing everything I possibly can to get that into the hands of the person that needs it.
Of the
So like,
right person, right?
yeah,
Not of every person. None of the thing that drives me crazy is when people market their books that this is right for everyone. Of course it's
no, yeah,
not.
no way.
Your
No.
ideal reader, you have to find them.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
I would say there's no book that's for everybody.
Yeah.
Like I've read books that like, my wife, who I'm the closest person to, she reads it and she loves it. I read it. And I tell you, I like most books. I read it and I'm like, I don't like this at all.
Right.
It's-
You look at any
yeah.
book on Amazon, your very favorite book in the whole world, and look at the 1 stars.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love that. What is your biggest joy when it comes to writing?
I love seeing people connect with story.
Yeah.
That's my biggest joy. I love hearing that something I wrote gave someone an emotional escape from whatever they're dealing with. I love hearing that like something I wrote helped somebody process something, right? Like I love hearing that I it's this and this is a weird thing that I do not recommend without taking some pretty massive steps, but I write minority characters. Um because when I started writing, I was like, there's just enough cis white men in the world as heroes. Like we just don't need any more.
Thank
So
you.
I was like, let's tell some other stories.
Yeah.
It demands a lot of extra work. Like my the series that I just finished has two female detectives, and the lead detective is an African American woman.
Mhm.
So, I know a bunch of African American women. I'm friends with a bunch of African American women. I got a team of 20 of them together, and for the first book, everything she said for the first 25,000 words, they had to approve. Right? Like they had to be like, "Yes, this is," and then just like spending time with them, listening to them, are like, "Okay, is this true to who you are?" And
Yeah.
like coming with a learner's approach before I could create that protagonist. And then even when I got to like the second book, where like, okay, now I'm, 100,000 words into this protagonist, getting them to read the second book to be like, please, read this again. And trying to not reading it to like approve of what I've done, but asking them to read it coming as a learner to be like,
Mhm.
am I getting this right? So like in the book I'm working on right now, which is a little bit of a kind of personal memoir, fictionalized memoir of my struggle with kind of my evangelical upbringing. I have a homosexual couple in the book. And so, going to some of my friends that are part of the community and the LGBTQ community and asking them like, hey, how does this feel? Am I doing this right? Like, how do I change this to make this more authentic and honoring of the community so that these characters represent who they're supposed to represent in the world? So for me, being able to do that and having somebody who tends to feel underrepresented suddenly feel represented, that brings me a ton of joy. Like that makes me really, really happy when I write. So I think it's about finding, and I know that's not for everybody. Like that's a kind of personal calling, but I think finding that kind of thing that like turns your writing into this gift um, for a specific group of people
Well, and
is,
what I love what you're saying about this too is that you're not doing it because it's the in thing, because it's, because people are talking about this right now. You're doing it for the right reason, with the right motivation, and listening to the marginalized communities that you're attempting to represent.
yeah. And it really, this is just a funny story, but it really hit me when I was working on my first book and my first fiction book, which is called Megan and the Monsters. And I was really kind of just like playing with the plot in my head and like trying to decide. I had never written anything 7 years ago, I guess it was. I had never written any fiction at all, and so I was just kind of like, how does this work? And kind of like thinking it through. And it was right when the Marvel movies were coming out real big, and I remember I'd taken my family makes it a point that we live amongst people who aren't like us. Like that's a really important part of the culture we're building as a family. So like my son was in a primarily African American elementary school. And so we were going to the movies and he had like some of his friends with him who were all African American. And I watched them like obsess over this movie poster, pre Black Panther, where like everybody on the Avengers poster is white.
Mhm.
And they're like debating which Avengers character they're going to be. And I'm like, man, none of those really represent them at all. Like it's you've got the billionaire Iron Man, and then you've got the like, kind of like military, white guy and Hawkeye, and then you've got the like, white woman assassin, and then you've got the white scientist, and then you've got the, Norse god. And it's like, all right, so it's great that they can find themselves in these characters still, but this is messed up. Like this is wrong. So that's when I was like, okay, if I'm going to do this thing, this needs to be part of what I do. I need to
And
like,
and we do need to point out too that then I've said this on the show many times, but you have to be careful and you have to go into it consciously and
oh, as a learner,
delicately.
yeah.
And yeah, and you I trust to do this.
Well, it's a lot. I don't trust me to do this, and
Well,
that's
that's
part of
good.
the reason yeah, that's part of the reason it works.
Keep that up.
Yeah, if you trust yourself to do this, stop.
Really? No, I'm serious. That's a really great point. If you think you'll be great at it, you are not the person.
Don't do it. Yeah, don't do it.
That's amazing.
Don't do it. You're gonna screw it up. Don't do it. Yeah, you're
All right,
gonna.
well, let's move forward into the craft tip because this is where I'm really anxious.
Yeah,
to
sorry,
talk to
I'll
you.
blabber all
So,
day.
I'm guiding us. That's perfect. So you are the dialogue master, and you very kindly reached out to me after I did
Oh,
mini.
that makes me really uncomfortable. Okay, sorry.
Well, I recently did the mini episode where somebody asked me like, how do you differentiate the voices of characters? And my answer was, I don't in a first draft. I just don't bother.
Which hurt my heart. I was like, oh no, no.
So I would like you to try to convince me to do it a different way because it works for me and I do
Yeah.
differentiate them later. But how do you do this? Talk us through a little bit of your
You got it.
process here
So
as
yeah,
the dialogue doctor.
so I started the Dialogue Doctor last fall. Really, Jay Thorne grabbed me and was like, "Hey, we
Yeah.
were talking about my writing career, like where it's going, and it landed on like this is a way I can help other people. Like this is something I can do to give back to the author community that's like given me so much." So
He was so excited about it. He told me on the side.
yeah,
He's gonna do this. So yeah, he really believed in it.
And so what I'm doing, before we get into what it is, so what I'm doing is I'm taking what I've been doing for the last 6 years in the simulation world, where taking the skills I've learned as this professional mimic who writes simulations and has to create different voices from all different walks of life and worlds, and applying that to fiction. So I'm taking these tools we use to build these simulations and adapting them for fiction writers. So let's talk about the problem first, just to define it well. The what I am affectionately calling your problem is monomouth, which means
Yes.
all of my characters sound the same.
All of mine do, always.
Yeah.
First draft, yeah.
Yeah, first draft. And so the goal is, how can I spend like 30 minutes to an hour max before I start writing a book to set myself up for a stronger first draft so that my characters won't all sound the same.
Yes,
Right? Like,
please tell me more.
yeah, so that when I edit, I'm not just editing, I'm not having to rewrite characters. I'm just tweaking. So the other byproduct of this that is really exciting is that if you can get different sounding voices, it will actually enable your plot. So if you can build characters that sound different and that complement and contrast each other strategically, you can set up the twists and turns in your plot just with their voice, right? Like we can
Wow.
design character voices that don't just make your first draft smoother. We can design character voices that establish the plot you want to create, the
It
character
sounds
transformation.
impossible and like it's stressing me out.
I'm sorry. Okay, so let's talk about how you do it. Step number one is understanding what character voice is, right? Because I find that a lot of people don't even get what that is. So I want you to picture a daisy, right? Like the white flower with petals around it and the like yellow center. And I call this the dialogue daisy because I feel like the illustration works well. So if we were to go underground and look at the roots of the daisy, we're gonna find character. We're gonna find character backstory. We're gonna find the character's place in culture. We're gonna find the character's place in power dynamics, and we're gonna find the character's like genetics and like genetic history.
Yeah.
Now I find that when I talk to writers about character voice, usually that's what they're thinking character voice is. They're
Mm.
like, the character voice is the character's backstory. They're like, look, I've developed character voice. I have an entire file of this character's back. I can tell you what this character was doing when they're 2 years old. That's not the character voice. That's the character
Right.
backstory.
Right.
But those are like the roots that build your character voice.
That makes sense.
So having those things, like dwelling on those things, isn't bad, but it's actually not necessary. You don't even need to do that. Um, Now I want you to move up from the roots, but what it does is it creates a good foundation for the character
Mhm.
voice. Um, I would recommend, if you're trying to do this fast and dirty, if you're writing a book a month and you have 1 hour to do this, I would say do that for your protagonist and maybe your main antagonist. And not your, when I say main antagonist, I don't mean like if we're talking Lord of the Rings, I don't mean Sauron, the eye in the sky. That's not your main antagonist, right? Like if your protagonist is Frodo, the hobbit that's taking the ring to burn it, your antagonist is Gollum, because
Yeah,
that's the
totally.
antagonist that he's going to spend enough like the massive amount of time with. That's the antagonist that's going to talk the most. So we're talking about like which antagonist. So I would do it for your protagonist and your antagonist and no other characters.
Love it. I'm all about fast and dirty. Yes.
Yeah, so fast and dirty, right? Like the more characters you do it for, the kind of richer your palette will be. If we think of like our characters as the colors we paint with, the
Hmm.
more you do it, the richer those colors can be, but you don't need it, right? If you're fast and dirty, character background, you know, understanding your character's place in culture for the protagonist and the antagonist, and then move on. Um, Out of those roots stem the character's personality. So when we think about backstory, let's say you're writing a character that has trauma, right? Like this character has come from an abusive family life. Uh, their personality is the expression of how they've responded to that trauma,
Hmm.
right? So maybe they came out of that trauma as super resilient, right? Maybe they came out of that trauma as super sensitive and compassionate. Right. Like so right now, and when I'm like doing the dishes and like cooking dinner, I'm watching through the TV show Supernatural.
Mm.
And it has two brothers, Sam
Hmm.
and Dean, right? Sam and Dean, same character background, right? Like
Right.
horrible life, father's demon hunter, trained them to be demon hunters. Personalities are radically different. Right, like Sam is, at least in the early. I'm only in season 3, so I'm sure he changes later. In early, Sam is like very compassionate. Struggles with the idea of what he does, is always looking for the best in others, right? Like, so this is Sam's personality. He likes to connect with people. He wants a normal life. He doesn't want to do this forever. Dean, on the other hand, is like accepting what his father taught him, whereas Sam is rejecting it. Dean is accepting it. And his personality is hard and cynical, and he loves the hunt, and this is what he wants to do.
What a great illustration. That's awesome.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
Thanks. So, from those roots can grow very different stems. So it's just important that we recognize that, like, yeah, that character personality, the question we have about character personality when we're looking at the stem is like, so how did they respond to what's going on in their
Mhm.
past, and how are they responding to what's happening right now, right? Like, because it doesn't have to be past backstory, it can be present story as well, right?
Mhm.
Like, so, you know, um I love the movie Juno. And so Juno as a character um is responding to this moment of teenage pregnancy with an extreme chill, right? Like, and embracing it
Yeah.
for all it is,
Yeah.
right? Like, not every stem is going to do that, right? Like,
Right.
but
Right.
that's this beautiful kind of like picture of how uh Juno's responding to that moment, right? Like, so sometimes the
Yeah.
stem is like, so all that to say, character personality is what you do have to do, right? Like, you do have to talk about your character. You do have to think about your character's personality
Coming from those roots and how
coming
it
from
grows
those
up.
roots
And
and
then what
growing up.
happens?
How much time you spend on the roots is up to you, but you got to grow it up. Then we get to the flower, and the flower is the actual character voice. So what I do when I get to my character personality is I will write down my character personality. I actually have a chart. I use this called the character wheel, and you can go to dialoguedoctor.com and get a copy of it. It's free.
Cool.
You just go grab it. So it's an Excel sheet, and the first column has character backstory, the second column has character personality, the third column has character notes, and then I do 3 columns, sometimes 5, And in the middle of those columns, I have character voice. And what I'm doing with character voice is I'm taking that character personality, which may be full of sentences, right? Like loves to engage with people, likes to, is helpful, enjoys helping
Shy
others,
at parties.
shy at parties, right? Like
Yeah.
whatever
Yeah.
phrases you want to have.
Yeah.
You want to find, and this is the hard part, you want to find 4 to 5 adjectives that are going to define that character.
I'm
So,
loving this. This is freaking me out. Keep
yeah,
going.
so like when you're looking at your flower, right? Like that person we just described, shy at parties, but loves other people, loves to help.
Mm-hmm.
We might say like open,
Mm-hmm.
protective, um, uh, uses
Nurturing.
lots,
Yeah.
yeah, nurturing, right? Like, and then we want to have some sentences that kind of describe the language they're going to use. Uses lots of words in one-on-one conversations, but becomes silent in groups, right?
Ah,
Asks a lot of questions, doesn't make declaratory statements.
really, really seems to listen more than speak.
Yeah. And you don't want more than like 2 to 3 of those per character.
Okay.
You want like
Because it
4
would
adjectives.
be confusing
It gets
otherwise.
overwhelming,
Yeah.
right? Like this is something you're supposed to put on your wall, glance at and be like, I got it. Right. So, and you can pair different things with it if it's helpful. So a lot of times after I build the voice, you can find a picture that you want to put with it that matches that voice. The key is build the voice first
Yeah, yeah,
and
yeah.
then put the picture to it,
What
right?
kind of
Or
picture do you use? I want to use flower pictures. I'm a deep lover of flowers. I want, I
so
want to be the Japanese anemone, and
yeah, so I've used I use all kinds of things. For one book I did colors.
yeah.
I was like, this character's blue, this character's pink, this character's orange. Now, I tell you that and those colors mean nothing to you. The key is they meant something to me.
Right. We're all gonna
And
take something different away from that.
yeah,
Okay.
I could just look up at and so what I do is I create my character wheel. I fill out all of my characters that I think are going to talk a lot. For a standard book, you want your protagonist, you want like major allies. So if we're thinking Harry Potter, you want Harry's voice, you want Hermione and Ron's voice,
Mhm.
you want Malfoy's voice. Um, in the later books, you want Voldemort, but in the first books, who cares, right? Like, so
Dumbledore.
you
We need
you
Dumbledore.
need
Yeah. Yeah.
Dumbledore, you need the characters that are going to talk a lot,
Yeah.
right? Like, and so getting those voices arranged in your chart um is uh is gonna set you off on the right foot. And again, 3 characters, like, so I'll do this with people, like they can hit me up on the site, schedule a session, and I'll actually help you get your book launched. We'll take an hour, we'll get your first 5 characters done.
Oh my gosh,
And
that's when you said that thing about the plot and how it can actually affect plot and how the book moves, I can actually understand now how that
yeah,
might
you
work.
get it, right? Like, so let's
Yeah.
talk about Harry, right? Like, because everybody knows Harry Potter.
Yeah.
So let's talk about Harry's voice, sullen, right? Like, and we're talking first book, sullen, outcast, easily frustrated, has something to prove,
Hmm.
right? Lots of declaratory statements, never backs down in a fight. Harry Potter, right? Like
Yeah.
kid Harry Potter. So the question is like, we want Harry to mature. And the question Harry is faced with as a character is, who is he becoming? Is he becoming Dumbledore or is he becoming Voldemort?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Like, and we have these 2 voices that we put next to him,
That we can
right?
look
Like,
at
so
those voices. Yeah.
yeah, so Voldemort is the future Harry if Harry goes bad, right? Like the sullen is exaggerated to bitter and angry. The feeling of an outcast is exaggerated to like this dark revolutionary who's like trying to take things over.
Hmm.
The never backs down from a fight is exaggerated to starting all of the fights, right? Like, so we're just getting an exaggeration of Harry's voice in that way. In the other way, Dumbledore also, right? Like, is an exaggeration of maturity of Harry's voice in the other direction, right? Like Dumbledore also never backs down from a fight, although he's
Also,
wise about it.
also declarative statements because he's the boss.
He's the boss,
Right.
right? Like Harry's clearly future boss. The question is like, which direction is Harry boss in? So now we have to put people around Harry that are going to challenge him to become Dumbledore and not Voldemort. So what does Harry need? Harry needs a community builder. He needs somebody who loves family. He needs somebody who's like looking for somebody to attach to. So contrasting Harry's like isolationist, sullen nature with Ron,
Mm-hmm.
who there's not a sullen bone in his body, right? Like everything's fun. But so they contrast, but they also complement, because you need your allies to like line up with each other. So Ron and Harry both feel like outcasts. They both feel like they have something to prove. They both have this
Yeah.
aspect of their voice that they're like not backing down from a fight. Ron's the the fourth brother in a large family, right? Like, so he's got Harry's like, I have to prove who my older brother knows who he is. My older twins know who they are. I have to prove who I am, and I'm trying to figure that out, right? Like, so complimenting and contrasting to push Harry in a specific way.
I
Then
could
you
see
build
how.
Hermione.
Oh yeah, go on with Hermione.
Yeah. So then you build Hermione, who has the discipline, the determination, and the grit that Harry needs to adopt in order to become Dumbledore. The
Yes.
like appreciation for hard work, studious nature, right? Like you can see that like all of this is missing from Harry's personality. And if you take Ron and Hermione and smash them together, you get what you want Harry to become.
And I can see how if you've got this chart before you and you're thinking about these gaps, because I really like a chart. I like to
Yeah.
see where gaps are.
Lay it out.
Yeah. And I can also see how this would be useful in not only our first draft. I'm going to go grab this immediately as soon as we hang up, because I'm actually right after this. I've got to do some rejiggering of this book,
I'll
which I
just
don't
email you a copy.
understand. Okay, please. I need it like in the next 10 minutes, because I'm going to
Yep.
get on this next call. I'm not even kidding. But I can see how this would be useful in the first draft, but also really useful in subsequent drafts too, as you get more and more.
Yeah.
You learn more about these characters. But I'm assuming also, and something I want to just mention really quickly, as we're running out of time, is that voice of the main character will it change a little bit by the end of the book?
Oh, you're my favorite interviewer because you ask the best questions. So you're picturing the flower, right? You got the big
Yeah.
yellow part in the middle. We've only been talking about the yellow part.
Oh.
Around the yellow part are the petals. So I want you to think about how you as a person, how you change when you talk. When you're afraid, you sound different
Yeah,
than when
definitely.
you're excited. When
Yeah.
you're excited, you sound different than when you're confused.
Mm-hmm.
Now, you always sound like you,
Mm-hmm.
but your voice is modulating based on the circumstances
So
you're
it's
around.
the tone of voice
It's the
then that
tone
we're
of
talking
voice.
about now.
Yeah, and what we're actually
Okay.
saying is that like there's aspects of your voice that are going to be exaggerated in some circumstances and muted in others. So let's go back to that original illustration we had of vulnerable and open and
Mm-hmm.
comforting, right? Like when that person's stressed, well, and we had protective in there too. When that person's stressed, the protective side of their voice is going to increase. They're going to
Mm.
talk less. They're going to guard themselves more. Their questions are going to become more outward focused and less reflective, right? Like,
Mm.
and all we're going to do is it's because we're in the same flower. We're just extending into one of the petals, right? We're just going to push into the protective petal. And then, but when they're in a moment of intimacy, like let's say you're writing a romance and they get to that moment where they're finally revealing their true nature, right? Their vulnerability is going to increase and that protectiveness is going to diminish.
Oh, that gives me
So
goosebumps.
we're
This
just
is
moving in.
this is so freaking useful.
Yeah, that's the
I
goal.
detest tips that like I go, oh, that sounds good, but I don't know how to use it. This sounds like an incredibly useful thing that I want to. I'm not kidding. Please send it to me.
So let's take it. Let's take it. Give me 30 seconds to take it to the next level for you.
Yes, please.
When you're writing a series
Yes.
like
Oh,
Harry
yes.
Potter, you write your character wheel for the first book, right? And then you write your petals. And what I do is when I start the chart, you'll see if you go to my site and download it, the top chart just says different emotional state.
Mm.
And then you think through what you're going to do. And you're like, okay, I know they're going to encounter these emotional states. And this is a living document. So like as you write, if you've got a new chapter, you're like, oh my gosh, I want to put them in a car chase, right? Like, and now they're scared out of their mind, but I don't have that on my chart. Great, put up another column. Scared out of their minds. How does their voice sound? Right? Like, so it's a living document. You can constantly expand it and grow it away. But your character's supposed to mature through your book.
Right. Right.
So by the end of your book, you've got all of these things up there. And then what I do is I look at one of the petals and I'm like, this is their main voice now. Through this book, they've become more protective. right? It was a sad, tragic book. They were in
And
a lot
also
of
the
fear. They were going bad.
antagonist can go. That's a because a lot of people I struggle. A lot of people struggle with like the antagonist can only progress so far. They will never step into their inner essence because we don't allow them to. But they
Yeah.
can step into the deepest part of this particular petal that you choose for
Yeah.
them.
And then the kind of like higher level of this, even like the 301 level course, after you start thinking about like, okay, from book to book, how's my character changing, right?
Yeah,
Because part of what I love about using this tool is it forces me to consider how my character should change through the book. I'm starting at this voice and I'm ending at this voice. And that's how this, like, how that's one of the things I find useful about this character wheel tool is that it forces me to consider character change when I start writing. When I'm plotting out the character, I'm thinking, okay, who are they going to be at the end?
hmm
Right? Like, and of course, my strategic brain, I'm like, okay, now how do I solve the puzzle to get them from where they are to where they're going to be? But so, and then it forces you to think like, okay, who do I need around them? Right?
yeah,
Like
yeah,
to
yeah,
help
yeah.
them become that person. And then for the antagonist, you want who is enough like them, but going in the different direction.
Going
So
on
you think
they're
like
on the down escalator instead of the
they're on
up.
the down
Yeah,
escalator. So you think of like Batman and Joker, right? Like
right.
really the same person,
Yeah,
right? Like both are weirdos in strange costumes that are causing havoc in the middle of the night,
yeah,
right? Like it's just one of them has decided that he's going to be good about it. And the expression of his voice is the opposite of the other, right? Like, so the Joker's gone totally bat crazy and his voice sounds nutty, right? Whereas Batman's voice is super reserved and he never says anything.
mm.
But what they share in common is that they're really the same personality type in person. The expression of it is just different,
And
right?
we
Like they
want
just,
them by the end
yes.
of it. Well, we don't care about the Joker, but we want Batman or whoever our main protagonist is by the end. I'm just really moved by
Well,
this
the
whole
reason we,
analogy that you use.
yeah.
Like
And the
in
reason we love
yeah,
the Joker is because he's constantly telling Batman, we're the same.
we're the same,
We're
exactly,
the
which
same.
is the worst thing he
Just
could
like
say.
me. Yeah. And he's constantly pushing Batman
Yeah.
to do the things that he does.
Yeah. But
Right.
what
Like
where we
there's,
want them to end is I always think about like with my best friends or with my most loved people.
yeah.
That's the point at which I don't have to think about my voice at all. My
Yeah.
voice is just my voice.
Just your voice.
And it's the
Yeah.
most it's the deepest part of myself that I don't have to worry about. And we want to get our characters there.
Yeah. And this is about just creating sheets to help you. Right? Like
Yes.
that's all it is. It's creating sheets to help you get it done so that you don't have to rewrite a whole first draft. Right. Like it's taking an hour to like figure out, like to sit and plot, like, okay, I'm going to plan out my characters' voices to enable faster writing, to
I'm gonna
enable
do this
faster.
today.
Nice. I love it. I
Jeff, we're
love it.
not even going to get to the other questions. And I don't care because you've like literally solved so many problems. And when my students now say, how do you write voice? I'm like, oh, I got a podcast
Oh,
for
this
you.
thing. This thing. Yeah, I
Go,
do this
go to
thing.
go to
Yeah.
dialoguedoctor.com right now. And so we can find you at Dialogue Doctor. Where else can we find you and your books?
Oh, my books are wide. So well, some of them are wide, some of them are just on Amazon. You can definitely find me on Amazon. I don't really have a good author website, so I'm not gonna bump it like but you can find me on Dialogue Doctor. There's a podcast. I'm new to it, so I think I'm about to do my 20th episode. I feel like
What's
a
it called?
baby. Dialogue Doctor podcast. So
Oh,
yeah, just go
perfect.
look up the Dialogue Doctor podcast.
Are you
And
writing a book on this?
yes, I'm writing a
Good.
book on this. It'll
Okay.
come out in April.
Oh, fabulous.
Which is great. I'm excited about that. And in the book, so the thing that we haven't talked about is like manipulating the emotional flow of your characters in every scene and in the story as a whole. Now that you know how to like modulate voices, manipulating the emotional flow so that you can manipulate how your reader feels through the whole book. So
Which
that like
is exactly what we want to do.
yeah,
Yeah.
thinking about like how do I want my reader to feel from the beginning to the end, and like manipulating that by modulating your character voices to just grab your reader by the heart and like make them feel what the protagonist is feeling. So
Okay. I need your
that's
book
what the book is about. Yeah,
ASAP. I
let's
need
go.
your book as soon as
It's on
possible.
its way.
Do ping me when it is available and I'll go ahead and put it in the show notes
Oh,
of
absolutely.
the show of the week it comes out because I want
Yeah.
people to know about it then
Well,
too. Oh,
and
hold
let me
on one
just say,
second for me.
yeah.
All my alarms are going off because I'm about to start a class. So you have
Okay.
like 30 seconds to wrap up.
30 seconds to wrap up. So if you can't pay for a session with me, listen to the podcast because I just do sessions on the podcast.
Oh,
So you can get what I do for free. Just go
Jeff,
listen to the podcast.
you're freaking awesome.
All right. I'm going to send you that chart. Thanks for having me on.
No, you are really, really awesome. And it has been wonderful to spend this time with you.
Yeah, it's a huge honor. Like I
Thank
said,
you.
you've had a huge
No, the
impact
honor
on my
is mine.
writing
You've
career.
just changed like my book writing process.
Yes. Victory is mine.
You're
That's
the
what
best,
brings
Jeff.
me joy. This brings me joy.
All right. Take care of you.
Bye,
Bye.
Rachel.